sharing durian ASEAN.
Anything can happen Friday. The art and cultural side of Southeast Asia. Hello and welcome to Durian ASEAN. You're with Gowri
and Grace on
Anything Can Happen Friday. So it's a Friday morning. As usual, we bring you the arts and cultural part of Southeast Asia. We have a different topic every week. Today, however, it will be more of a discussion, debate kind of topic. And we will be discussing the very controversial, of recent actually it became quite a controversial issue with all this.
Is it still controversial?
Probably. And we're talking about Spotify and other streaming devices of the like. And we have invited 3 people over to our studio. Well, not quite 2 people. One of them is joining us all the way from Penang. So let's say hello to John.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
We also have G.
Hello.
Hi.
And we have Danny all the way from Penang.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for joining us today. So we're trying to get a very inclusive actually view from different background in music. So of course we have John, who is from the pop scene, and G is more the indie pop rock, and Danny, of course, indie alternative as well from Penang. And maybe we can start by talking about what kind of music do you guys do, and what is your stand on Spotify first? Do you agree with it? Do you currently have your music on it? And how's it going? Maybe we can start with John.
I'm the vocalist of a local band called Paperplane Pursuit, and we play pop music. All our music is available on Spotify, so I guess that is our official stand, that we're okay with Spotify. But I think for today, my views will be split between how I feel about it as a consumer and how I feel about it as a contributor or musician.
Okay, and what about G?
I play keys for a local band called Son Of A Policeman, and I'll stand on Spotify. Well, we don't have any songs on Spotify yet, but I would not say our stand. I would say like all views that I'm going to give today are those of my own, not the band. I would say I support Spotify because I find it beneficial to my lives, and as a musician as well, I think that there are more pros than cons in this case.
Okay, and
so you do use Spotify quite often?
I do. I'm actually a subscriber. I pay for Spotify, so I don't have to listen to ads.
Okay, and Danny, what about you?
Hi, so I'm a poet and a musician. I don't currently have any music on Spotify. I don't plan to put anything on in the near run, but I will also be talking about why that is from a very specific standpoint, because I feel that it depends really on the context of what you do and what you expect out of it. So I'll be sharing really why I don't have anything up on Spotify yet, and if it comes up, then maybe for artists who have a situation similar to mine, or are doing things similar to me, then what other options could possibly be there other than Spotify?
All right. And what about Grace? I mean, you're a musician as well. Maybe a little input from your side.
Well, I don't support
okay, it's pretty
Spotify.
clear.
Yeah, it's very clear. Mainly because I'm coming from the musician's point of view. Well, as much as we will get exposure to send our music out there, but then we also need to cari makan after that. I mean, that's a very simple reason that I will say at this point first. Yeah.
So let's start with a little comparison between all these different music streaming sites. I mean, not only Spotify, of course, we also have Deezer, we also have Google Play, and Jay-Z recently launched his own service called Tidal, and then we also have iTunes. Maybe one of you can shed some light on the differences between all these different types. Maybe John, do you have your music on iTunes, Deezer as well?
Yeah, it's everywhere. I think for me, I've explored Tidal for a very short while, so I think the biggest difference for Tidal in Malaysia is going to be price. The fact that it's extremely costly is going to turn people off, no matter how good it is. Because I find that a lot of people aren't even paying for Spotify here. So if you go even higher than Spotify's price, I don't think anyone's going to pay for it. I think maybe Apple Music is a better comparison than iTunes. But so far the interface is really poor. So that's going to be a big issue as well. So I like G, I have to say that like openly I use Spotify very often as well. I pay for Spotify Premium. and I really like the interface. So the biggest difference for me is I think it's a pretty sweet plus price point as a consumer.
Okay.
And the interface is really good, and you rarely get I guess like there are classics, the older stuff where you can't really find it sometimes in the library.
Okay.
But otherwise, the interface is really good and really easy to use.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Tidal, is that open to everyone as well, for anyone at all to upload their music?
At the moment, I think it's not open yet.
Okay.
But I imagine that will change very quickly.
Okay. And what about G? I think John mentioned that he does use Spotify a lot, and you said you pay for it as well. How's the experience been? What do you think is so attractive about Spotify that you even pay for their service?
You see, I can't really give an unbiased opinion here because I haven't really used the other interfaces. You see, when Spotify first came out, I think what really attracted me to it was this function that people can create playlists and then share them publicly. Or in other cases, Spotify has created their own playlists, like mood playlists, you see, like when I feel down, when I feel angry, when I feel happy.
Right.
These kind of playlists, and playlists like for work. And it's a great way to discover new music and put music into a context, you see. And coupled with that, it has a very big library that is constantly growing. I was doing some reading on the internet, and I figured that for a musician, one of the main differences between these whatever you mentioned, Google Play, iTunes, the payout for Spotify is actually significantly lower, if I'm not mistaken, compared to the previous platforms. But that's also taken into consideration. Spotify may have a wider audience compared to these platforms, you see.
And what about Danny? I know that you're not really a fan of Spotify, and what's your take on this?
Okay, I think first of all, it's important to understand that there's a difference between talking about streaming technology and talking about Spotify specifically.
Okay.
Because for me, it's not that I don't like Spotify. I think like John and G, my position is that it's great for consumers, especially consumers who are, I think like John said, like Tidal, but Tidal is really focused on a premium experience, right? And that's generally the case where you have less people signing up for like high fidelity music, you know, people who are very concerned about what kind of bit rates they're getting out of their music. So as a consumer, I feel Spotify has hit this sweet spot where most casual listeners or people who listen to music really when they're doing stuff and not really as a serious pursuit would find it very, very attractive because of the price and because of the convenience. Whereas for, I think everyone has mentioned, really there's a huge space or schism between the consumers enjoying something and then the people who produce that stuff, like the artists, the musicians, the bands, actually making a living out of it, which, you know, doesn't quite make sense, because if the customers are happy by everything we learn in growing up or in business school or whatever is that then the people producing the stuff should be doing well, but that's not the case. And for me, it's not streaming technology that's causing that problem. It really is the way services like Spotify are set up. And and the way that fits into the way how the industry is working at the moment. So I wouldn't say that I have anything against Spotify. It's just that as an artist, for my goals, for my music, and for my listeners, and for what I want to do, it doesn't really make sense to be a part of it. As a listener, as someone who would wants to listen to music on the way to work or on their phone or on their other devices, then yeah, it makes sense.
And that sounds a bit like what Grace mentioned earlier as well, that it is not really in line with your goals as a musician. So is that also something that is important when it comes to deciding whether or not you want to use Spotify? Maybe
as
John,
a consumer or
as a musician? I
think maybe Paperplane Pursuit has a very pragmatic point of view very often, and that is I mean, to put it very crudely, beggars can't be choosers, that kind of thing. Like, at this stage, yeah, frankly speaking, the amount we get paid from Spotify is pittance. It's terrible. But our priority at this stage is, as they say, getting your music out there. So we play a show, for example, and we know that there may be people who already know us, but there may be a huge selection of people who come to the show and like, oh, okay, these guys are pretty good. Let me go back home and check them out. And we have learned that we can't be picky about which platform people find us on, because you're not Taylor Swift, basically, who, no matter where you remove your music and put it on, people will go and find it. Whereas at this stage, we have the opinion that people are just casually looking for us. So if it's a Spotify user, for example, they might go home from the show and say, okay, let me look up this Paperplane Pursuit. And they look us up, and if we are not there, and then they're like, okay, too bad, forget about it, move on with life. So at this stage, the priority is making sure people have somewhere to follow up, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Facebook. And frankly, as I say, we are not choosy over which medium, because the mindset is that wherever people are in their medium of preference, they must be able to find us.
Okay.
So, sorry?
Sorry, can I add, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Danny.
Wanted to add something to that.
Sure.
So I think this is where it becomes important for an artist to consider really like what the listeners that they are reaching out to. Because, for example, like with my work and my kind of music and the stuff that I do, I do not expect a large number of people to enjoy it, simply because it's more niche, right? Most of my work is most of the people who buy my albums or look me up is from word of mouth. It's from people who watched me live and then either bought my album or got onto my website or whatever, and then they told their friends about it or bought my album as gifts for them, and then their friends started getting interested. So I think if you're making really like you said, like if your goal is the work you do, you feel will definitely reach out to a lot of people, and you need to capture them after they've listened to you the first time. Then to me, that whole getting your music out there strategy makes a lot of sense. But if you're an artist who's doing something which you feel is quite niche, your plan is really not to appeal to as many people as possible, but rather to a particular group of people. Then it doesn't make as much, like the return on the investment is much lower.
I agree.
Simply because there are options for that sort of behavior, that sort of work that you do, and the way that people listen to it, and the way that people hear about it, and the way that they acquire it, then there are other options. So I think the takeaway is that you really have to know like what you do and how people respond to it and how they go and buy it.
I can also add on to his opinion where coming from artists or musicians' point of view, when you send your music to Spotify or any other streaming services, there, it's easier for fans to grab your music and search for your particular songs they want to listen to. But however, for musicians, you know your target audience when you want to send your music. So if Spotify is your platform to explore and then get more exposure on your music, and that could be a right choice. More platform that you send your music, you never know what kind of audience you will be reaching. But then what Danny said, I agree in a certain extent, where as long as you know your audience and your music is, for example, your music genre is pretty niche, then that particular audience will listen to your music. They will find, no matter what kind of platforms they will just search, keyboard search, even send you a private message or on Facebook. They will try to get your songs, whichever platforms they can.
And with that, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we will continue our discussion on whether or not to Spotify.
Anything can happen Friday. The art and cultural side of Southeast Asia.
Hello and welcome back to Duran ASEAN. You're with Gowri
And Grace.
and of course we have John, G and Danny here with us to discuss about Spotify, the pros and cons, the advantages, disadvantages, and whether or not it's good for the music industry. So I think let's talk more about the payment for the second part of the interview. Maybe for G, you have used Spotify and Spotify Premium as well. So apart from no ads, are there any other benefits for you as a consumer using Spotify Premium?
Yeah, two main benefits basically. I can download my music, so I don't have to have a wireless connection wherever I go, internet connection wherever I go. And another one is the quality of the music. You can have a higher bit rate if you have a Spotify Premium.
Right.
I think mostly people just pay because really the advertisements are quite annoying. I've actually been to like restaurants that actually play music via Spotify, and then the ads come on. It's so embarrassing.
Right.
It's so embarrassing. As an establishment, you should be able to afford 15 ringgit a month. It's 1.5.
Okay.
You know?
So John, of course with Spotify and Spotify Premium, is Spotify Premium any better? Does it pay you more? Is there any advantages as a musician?
Spotify's policy doesn't change according to what the user is using. They just have a fixed amount that they pay you per play, and it's it's really quite a ridiculous, like 0.00002 or something like that cents per play.
So even if I pay more, I'm not actually helping out the musician. It's just for me, for my convenience.
Okay, that's a good question to ask, because as I was saying, right, as the way we approach things, we have kind of because of the fact that we play pop music, so by very definition of the music we play, the goal is to cast as wide a net as possible.
Yeah.
And Danny and Grace both mentioned the position of being in a place where your fans will seek you out wherever you are and find a way to support you. And I believe that's a sweet spot for the artist to be. And that is definitely the goal that I think every artist, whether pop or otherwise, should aspire to. But the sort of mindset that we operate behind is that there's like a trickle down for the fans. Like, let's just say we aim to cast 1 million, a net towards 1 million people. Out of that 1 million, maybe 100,000 are going to come find you online. Out of that 100,000, maybe 10,000 will actually do something about it, like pay. And out of that 10,000, maybe 1,000 will actually find you wherever you are and buy, support you for life or whatever it is. So Spotify is just one of the steps to get as many people in as possible. So coming back to your question, sorry, it sounded like a diversion.
It's okay.
I think many people in the arts community demonize Spotify as the person that isn't paying musicians enough. But I don't think that's Spotify's fault per se. I think that's just sort of a symptom of the internet. What happened when the internet came along and became really common is that music started becoming available for free online. And you mentioned specific payments as well. Quite frankly, I can say that the amounts we get from Spotify, I think our average songs, a lot of our music went up on Spotify quite late, so I guess we didn't capitalize fully, but the average amount we have probably is about 30,000 plays per song.
Okay.
And out of that many plays, honestly, the amount we get from Spotify is just negligible. We could just forget about it and just carry on with our business. But having said that, even if it's, say, 100 ringgit a month, that's 100 ringgit more than we'd be getting from everybody just pirating our music online. And we don't subscribe to the theory of, your typical ministry, belilah original, jangan cetak rompak, because no one's going to listen.
True.
Everyone's going to torrent anyway, everyone's going to download anyway. So this way, people have found a legal means to support music. And a lot of people feel pretty good about it. Whether or not you're paying for premium or not, it is, I'm not doing something illegal, I'm actually supporting the artist. As to whether or not Spotify pays the artist more based on the consumer paying, I think really that's just a function of supply and demand. It's basic business. If Spotify has 10 million users and 10 people are paying for 15 ringgit a month, I don't think anyone can expect Spotify to be paying artists a fair amount.
Right.
So it's not so much of the business fault anymore, although I can think of things that Spotify could do better. But when your consumers themselves have a problem paying 15 ringgit a month for an unlimited amount of songs, how much money can an artist expect to make from Spotify? So is it really Spotify's fault, or is it a byproduct of the consumer mindset that music has no value? And that mindset, no company can change. Like, really, that's just awareness and people's ability to appreciate the arts.
Right. And I guess what Danny wanted to know as well was, has it actually helped you to reach a wider audience?
Danny, do you understand? That's true. Danny,
why don't you answer that question first? And then I'll add on.
Okay.
honestly, my honest answer, I think, has to be that we're not sure yet. Because as I said, right now we are still in the stage of casting our net as wide as possible.
Okay.
And in our business model, I think the amounts we make from music sales, whether it's through streaming or iTunes downloads or whatever, is the smallest amount that we make. The primary amount of our income comes from playing live shows and from endorsements. And for both of these things, our income is very dependent on whether people know our songs. And radio plays a big part in that. We focus a lot on radio airplay. And also whether, when you're talking about endorsements, very often you might have an agency person, for example, who says, okay, we've got this big product launch that we want to do. Should we get Paperplane Pursuit as an endorsee? And they will pitch it to the client. And the client will basically, like, the question that needs to be answered is, do we know the band? So radio airplay helps that as well. And the client's next question will be, do we know the songs of this band?
Right.
And a lot of those clients will actually look at these platforms to check. YouTube, Spotify, and a lot of them go as far as to check your online numbers as well. Are people playing it? Are people shazamming it? And if the clients find that those numbers are low, or for example, I can't even find you on YouTube or Spotify, then it's like, oh, maybe they're not the best bet for our products because maybe our clients or our customers don't know these bands, so forget about it. So in that way, is Spotify specifically helping us? It's very hard for us to say right now without paying AC Nielsen or somebody to do some expensive market research survey for us. But as I said, the strategy right now is to just cast as wide a net as possible. And maybe our goal is about 2 or 3 years' time we can sort of consolidate and say, okay, maybe this is not the one that's paying the best or the most returns, let's drop it. Sort of as I said, like Taylor Swift is at the point where she's like, okay, you know what, you're not paying me enough, I'm just going to take my music out because people are going to come and look for it anyway. And her album downloads have been one of the best in recent years. We are frankly just not there yet.
How about Danny?
Okay.
I think he wanted to say something.
Yeah, okay, so I think he has a lot of good points, but I also have to disagree on some points because there's a reason why I said we really have to think of streaming technology and Spotify as two separate things.
Very true.
Because Spotify is a one service, a one business. They've got a business model utilizing streaming technology as a way for them to, make their profit, or in this case, not make any profit. But so there's a reason for that, and the reason being that because the conversation or the discourse over these last few years has been focused on how is streaming technology affecting artists? It's just people come up and say, oh yeah, people have been conditioned to expect music for free, and that's what's screwing up all the artists. That's what is affecting the livelihoods of the artists. And I will tell you that that is a red herring. If you look up a lot of industry blogs or like artist blogs and stuff like that, the whole idea that streaming technology is what's affecting the livelihood of artists is simply a spin. Okay? What is affecting the livelihoods of artists is the fact that our music industry, or when we say the music industry, very often we refer to the American music industry, right? We don't particularly have a lot of exposure to the European side, or say the world music industry, which is actually a $1 billion industry that we just don't hear about. So the real challenge that a lot of artists are experiencing is the fact that the American industry, or the music industry as we refer to it, is an oligopoly. It's if you know what a monopoly is, a monopoly is basically when one company owns the entire market and there's no competition, right? An oligopoly is when a few conglomerates owns the market and dictates the entry barriers and how other people can work in the market, and that's exactly what's going on right now. So the music market is pretty much run by a few conglomerates and their subsidiaries, and they set the rules, okay? And therefore they set rules that work for them. So Spotify is, as you said, on one hand has to work within this market, and therefore they have worked out agreements that benefit these these companies and themselves,
Yeah.
because Spotify's business model is not to make profit in terms of sales. Their business model is growth. I mean, if you read between the lines in all of their how would you say, public press statements and all this kind of thing, they keep talking about growth.
Yeah.
That's because their business model is growth.
Yeah.
If you think Spotify is not working within the model where it's not a one-to-one model where there's music and there's someone who buys it and then there's someone in the middle, and whatever is minus the middleman ends up in the pocket of the artist. It doesn't work that way because they're not selling music. They're selling access to the music.
That's true.
They're kind of like a museum.
Yeah.
You pay the entry fee to go in. You don't own any of the art. You don't get to keep any of the art, but they pay for access.
Nice
right?
analogy.
Right? So the big problem with Spotify is that they are their payment schemes and their payment tiers actually is really designed to profit the companies, not the artists.
Yeah.
Right? And that's not a fault of streaming technology, because my sales have been mostly on sites like Bandcamp, actually specifically Bandcamp. And simply because Bandcamp has a more of a one-to-one relationship between sale and profit. Meaning that people buy my stuff and then they take a cut at the end of the day based on how much I've sold, and then I get to keep the rest. There is no middleman. So for me, that just having it on Bandcamp solves a lot of my issues. Like I get to keep most of the profit minus a small fee for Bandcamp, and it is small. I keep most of the profits. Right? I have an online platform for people to find me. So if someone, generally when people want me to perform or want me to come for an interview or want me to, I don't get endorsements because I'm not a pop artist, so I'm not really worried about that. But they just have to come to a Bandcamp URL. And now that I have my own website, I don't even need to give them the URL. I can just, it's a page on my website that uses the Bandcamp widget. So everything is on there, right? So I understand this whole thing about wanting to provide access, and also the fact that Spotify isn't completely to blame. It's also a function of how this industry has really turned into a very unfair environment for the producers, exploitative even. But I feel that there are much better options. I feel the only reason why I would want to put my work on Spotify is if I wanted to tap into the market that Spotify already has. I think they have 60 million listeners. It sounds like a really big number. Wow, millions of people are going to listen to me. But even if you look at a lot of very indie artists who are quite well known, they sell out concerts and stuff. Their plays are in the tens of thousands because you have to break that number down into region, into access, into genre, into what Spotify's algorithms are for you to appear on their on the playlist, and there's all sorts of things. I think I can't remember which artist said this, but I think it's very true when they say that it's less like music and more like financial speculation now, and that is the issue with Spotify, is that it's not honest.
They're not transparent at all.
It's not transparent, and really all the way they've arranged their agreements and their payment schemes and everything is really, at the end of the day, the artist is an afterthought. The producers of the music are an afterthought because it's illegal not to pay them.
That's
So
true.
this is my
Right.
problem.
And I think I want to ask John. I think the last time you were here, you mentioned something about exclusivity as well. So maybe do you think you should limit the number of music that you put on Spotify, so even in terms of exposure, they can listen to 1 or 2 songs and then they're like, oh, okay, this band is really good, so they will look you up on other platforms instead of just relying on Spotify.
Just for context, can you remind me what I said about exclusivity?
I think you sorry about that. I think you said something about how you don't play it every gig or something because you still want to maintain that exclusiveness.
I see.
It's not too readily available for everyone.
I think that comes back down to what I said about the mindset of not expecting people to follow you where you are, but being where the consumers are. Like Danny mentioned, the existing market that Spotify has.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something we want to capture. So we, at this stage, we're not expecting anyone to hear 2 songs and then, okay, let me go on iTunes and buy this album or somewhere else. It's just consume where I want to be.
Okay.
And I agree with Danny for a lot of things he said, actually. Like, we used to be on Bandcamp as well. I think we still are.
Okay.
We don't bother with the page anymore. But we used to sell our album on Bandcamp for basically pay whatever you want. So starting at free to our previous album to, unlimited. And it was encouraging. Some people paid up to 300 ringgit for an album.
Okay.
Really, like, even we were like, wow, okay, we were expecting 5 maybe, if you're being generous.
Yeah.
Or 50 or whatever. One of 2 people paid 50, some people paid 100.
Okay.
But, and I mean, that goes to show that, as Danny said, when you have a platform like this which serves an artist who has a dedicated fan base, then it works out really well. But, I mean, in all honesty, I think if I tabulated, I can't remember off the top of my head, but if I tabulated the total amount that we made from Bandcamp for the album, I think maybe it'd be like 1,000-2,000 ringgit. So the basic math just didn't add up. It was, okay, this is great, and there are some people who clearly like us, but we can't make a living doing this unless we're putting on an album every day and then making 1,000-2,000. Then it's like, okay, it's pretty good money.
Right.
So again, it comes back down to what I said about casting as wide a net as possible, where eventually you want to be for sure in that sweet spot where wherever I go and play, people will travel the world to see my concert. Wherever I put my music up, people will find us on that platform to download our music or pay for it or whatever. But until then, and I'm assuming the number will be fairly smaller, like I said, the larger the starting amount is, the bigger the trickle down amount. So if we start with 10 million people, then hopefully we end up with 100,000 and we can make a good living off that. But if we start with 10,000 people, then we might end up with 100 and not make any money. So we can't afford to have exclusivity online. In person we can control it, online or not at this stage.
Okay.
I think that's when it's very tricky.
Yes.
Yeah, to control the market when it comes to online because of the internet access, right? It has become way easier than before. Everything is just right in front of you and you can just pick it up. And because of that, they crafted our mindset, everything is available. Just like you don't go to bookshops anymore because things are available online. So you buy books online, you read books online, things are available again. So same goes for the Spotify and the music. Music, because of Spotify and also other streaming services, music is available, and then you can just click and you can grab it and you can listen to it. But then again, coming from the musician's point of view, it's again the different story if you really want to make a live out of it. And then he gave the example of going to museum and it's available. But even go to museum, people pay a lot of money for the entrance fee, unless it's a public museum places. Even public museum, how many famous public museum places are there, you know? All these pieces that with the effort and then the sweat the artist paid for, it's worth it, go to museum and to see the place. Spotify has more than 30 million songs available for free. Yeah. And then, even if you pay 15 ringgit per month, it's really nothing, So for musicians and artists, what do we get? Actually, where is the appreciation? I mean, other than listening to music, appreciation, respect to certain, music genre they listen to.
Actually, if you don't mind me responding to that.
Yeah.
You brought up a good example of books and books being available online. I like reading. I enjoy reading. I always have. But maybe because of time, or like you say, who goes to bookstores anymore? So I haven't read in a while. But then I got a Kindle a few years ago.
Kindle is good, yeah.
And I found that I've quadrupled the amount that I read. I read about a book a week, which is good by my standards compared to what I used to read back then. And if I'm free, for example, I might finish a book in 2-3 days and then go buy another book on Amazon. So the availability of books online has totally increased the amount that I read, and I pay for all of these books. So if you're looking at maybe 10 USD per book, that's, easily say 80. I spend probably about 80 USD per month on books alone. So the availability definitely has not decreased my consumption as a consumer, and not decreased my spending. So to me, that's a very good thing. But
as a consumer's point of view,
as a consumer and from the producer's point of view, if, for the author's point of view, I think if there are more consumers like me who consume books in this way, then authors should be benefiting greatly from having their books online, because there's no paying for the publishing cost. There's, the only middleman that they have to deal with basically is Amazon, compared to in the past where there'd be many, even the bookstore will take a profit, for example. But if we bring this comparison to the music industry, it comes back down to, like you said about Spotify and 15 ringgit for such a huge amount. But immediately within that comparison point, people don't want to pay 15 ringgit a month for an unlimited amount of music. I don't think that's Spotify's fault. Like you said, it's such a vast amount. And people still don't want to pay that small 15 ringgit a month. And G gave a fantastic example that's always bothered me of, okay, if the average person doesn't want to spend 15 ringgit, I understand. But you've got shopping malls and cafes that don't want to pay 15 ringgit. That's embarrassing.
They pay for Starbucks for 15 ringgit just every day.
So I think any medium, any platform, really the how much money they can make, where the business model goes, whether they get people on the platform really depends on the content, right? How much content they have on the platform determines it. And the question I have for an artist like myself, forget about pointing fingers at anyone else, is if we remove our content from Spotify, are we going to make anything of a dent? I think the dent is made by your big artists saying, you know what, I don't think this is worth the money, so I'm going to pull it off. And then maybe the consumers eventually go, all the artists I want to find are not on this platform, I'm going to go away. I don't think we are, for us, Paperplane Pursuit, we are not in that position to dictate terms at this moment. So basically, I want to get to a point where I can, and then dictate terms. But until then, removing our music is just a disadvantage.
Of course,
I think also that we have to understand that there's a lot of intersectional things, a lot of intersectional influences, because like what John was saying, for example, are you in an economy and a society that prioritizes paying that 15 ringgit for music? Does it have the culture of saying we're going to support artists? But there's also other things to think about. For example, I feel like a lot of musicians don't have the information of what to expect when they put up an album. Because I've spoken to a lot of people, and even myself, when I put out so many years ago my first song, your only point of reference are these big stars who put out a song or a video and it gets 1 million plays. And it comes to the point where you think that is success. Where you think that is what to be expected if your work is good. And a big wake-up call for me was when I was reading an article about quite a well-known guitarist who had gone solo, and he pointed out that even having signed to a big label and having millions of fans, he only made back the cost of his first album after he put out his 5th album.
That's true. You hear this a lot.
So I think the problem is that we're still looking at music as this one-to-one barter relationship, where I put out an album, I make money out of this album, and I make out. It doesn't work that way. And to be fair, it never has. Then that's why all these big companies came up, is because when you put out your first album, it's not just the cost of making the album, it's the cost of marketing, it's the cost of branding, it's the cost of getting your name out there. And then, when you put up, so it's completely normal to make only a fraction of the cost on your first album. And, and then you put out your second album. By that time, you've made the media contacts, you've played in venues, more people know about you, they've told your friends about you, you make a little bit more, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
So there's all these intersectional things, like how does this market work? What is the business like now as a producer? When I say producer, I mean as an artist who's producing artistic work.
Yep.
So how does that affect your strategy? Because if we're talking about making money out of music, then we're talking about doing it as a business.
Yeah.
Well,
Right?
yeah.
There's no point going all, like, oh, I do it for my art and stuff like that. Because if you're doing it for your art,
Thank you for saying that.
No. I mean, it's true. If you're doing it for your art and you're not worried about making any money out of it, you're just happy to put it out.
Business.
You don't. You don't have to worry about all these sort of
There we
things.
go.
Yeah.
But
right.
if you do need to cover the cost of your albums and your tours and your equipment and stuff like that, you do have to treat it like a business.
Yes.
Even if it's not a business you plan to make a huge profit from,
Yep.
you have to worry about how much of your costs you're subsidizing based on sales.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think one of the most important things an artist needs to ask themselves is really, what do I expect
Yeah.
from this?
Very
Because
true.
I don't believe that not putting my music on Spotify is having is making them worry every morning, like, oh shit, then he's not on Spotify, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's true, because it's symptomatic of a very, very large industry problem,
Yeah.
which is not going to go away anytime soon. So for me, my choice is that, like, why would I get involved in that? I am making the kind of profit that I expect from my first EP. I'm getting the kind of traction that I expect by having it on these platforms that I already have. I'm getting the kind of media attention I want. I'm not particularly planning or expecting to be asked to perform at corporate events and stuff, simply because the nature of my music and the themes that I use in it, it doesn't make sense for that sort of platform. So I think, when you think about putting it on Spotify, like you said, like for you, it's definitely very pop. You want to be on the hottest new thing right now, because that really makes sense for your branding, for what you do. So I think for a lot of artists, it really your question is, what do I do?
Yeah.
And
What is the strategy?
what makes sense for me? Because I think the takeaway is that the days of music being your product or your only product that you put out, and it's a one-to-one relationship of selling your product and making a profit, that stuff went out decades ago.
Yes.
Decades and decades ago, long before online streaming came out.
Yes.
Your music really is either your music is your branding, really. The stuff you put out now is your branding for the brand of my band, or myself as a solo artist. And it will only make you a profit really very, very long down the line, once your brand has been established and your market has been established and people are paying for it. So right now it really is about, does putting it on Spotify work for my brand, or my band as a brand, or does it have little or no effect on my branding, or is even bad for my branding if I put it on Spotify? I think that's the question artists should be asking, really.
I think it's very necessary for all these music institutions to change their syllabus, update their syllabus when it comes to online streaming services. What can you get from? I think we need to educate students first, or youngsters.
Actually, I think we need to educate people on the business of music in general.
Yeah, for sure as well.
Because if I may make a comparison, basically the problem that a lot of people are having with Spotify or streaming services in general is that music is available for free and they're not getting paid enough for it. Doesn't that sound like radio? Radio has been around for the longest time, and it exists on almost the exact same model. The basic difference, I think, is that listeners can choose what they want to listen to on Spotify when, but a large portion of Spotify listeners that I observe just listen to it like radio. This is a playlist playing in the background. So that's basically radio. I don't think anything has changed that much, really.
That is a very good point.
Okay.
And another point that I would like
Yeah.
to make, because I haven't been talking for a while.
Let's all shut up.
No
Sorry.
worries.
That's a
okay,
good
here's
point.
the thing. I want to raise something. Okay, compared to you, John and Danny, I haven't had much experience with dealing with music. How do you say? Business institutions, because I personally don't believe that until you reach the level of legends, like in the industry, like maybe like Taylor Swift, who has the power to pull out her music and people will actually follow. She has the power to make an impact just by that simple move. We're not going to make music putting albums out on Spotify anytime soon, right? That's what we've all been discussing. The main reason why, as a musician, I would put my music on Spotify is to get a bigger reach. For example, I discover new artists that I actually like, and they have a small following only, but I discovered them on Spotify through, let's say, one of the playlists I mentioned earlier, one of the mood playlists.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, in this day and age, I think I'm not unrealistic to say that very, very few people would just go out there and buy a physical album. Now, this physical CD album is the one that nets the artist the most amount of profit, you see. That one unit can net them in terms of the cost versus profit. But how many people will actually go out there and buy, unless it's, number one, they're very big fans of you. Like someone is a big fan, I idolize this person, I'll go out and buy all his merchandise and his albums. Or number two, it's not easily available on other platforms, and I'm that kind of person. For example, a niche market like what Danny mentioned, I can't find it anywhere else. I'm this kind of listener, I like this music, I have to buy it. There's no one else to get it. Yeah, find it.
Okay.
So you guys have been talking about like my fans will find me on Spotify, but I see it as I will get more fans on Spotify, you see, and then the fans when they listen to my music and they like it, and then they come to find me. Because at the end of the day, I feel like the music industry is a popularity game, because the more popular you are, the more people that like to listen to you, the more money that you actually net. And one more controversial statement that I'll drop, that I've been waiting to drop for a long time, is that nowadays it seems that anyone can become a musician. Music has become cheap because it is not a tangible product. There's no standards to good or bad music. What is good music? What is bad music? There is only music that I like and not like, you see? And I would like music based on a lot of factors, whether it affects me positively, whether I agree with the lyrics, or whether my friends like it, whether I want to be part of that bunch. It's very, very subjective.
It is very subjective, and it's ironically, playing music is too expensive.
Yeah, there we go.
It's expensive hobby. Yeah, I mean,
I just like to. I mean, we brought up Taylor Swift a few times, and I actually wanted to bring this up earlier. I didn't have the chance. People think that when Taylor Swift pulled out, like people went with her, and then Spotify lost listeners. It's actually the other way around. The whole Taylor Swift thing gave them a huge spike.
Publicity.
It's true.
Of listeners.
I agree.
Right?
I found that out too.
And I also feel that the argument that anyone can make music now, and that there's a lot of terrible music and stuff. I think to an extent that is also sort of what you call golden goggles. Like the past is always better simply because we hear the best things about it. But the truth is that it's not any different than the past, where anybody could pick up an instrument, walk into an open mic and play really, really, really terrible music. Yeah. Because like you said, music is subjective. Yeah. I might listen to someone's homemade rap album and go like, what? I don't know. but someone else might be like, his experience really speaks to me. I'm going to support him. Blah 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 blah. You know, because when I started doing my thing, because I do poetry and like a bit of sort of like proto rap, not quite modern rap, but the more sort of olden spoken word style of rap. There were people who came up and said, that's the most amazing thing ever. And there were definitely people who came up and said like, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is not rap. Please stop. So it is subjective. It has always been subjective. That hasn't changed. So for me, a lot of these arguments that come up saying that we have to use Spotify because this, or we have to use this because that. I feel like a lot of them don't really quite
consider everything.
Consider the fact that these things are not new. Music has always been subjective. And so I wanted to add that.
I have golden goggles for the present. I think music has gotten cheaper, but I'm very happy about that because I wouldn't have been able to afford making music in any other era.
Right.
Like the fact that even now we basically make music on a computer in my house. It's like that's beautiful for me. Yeah.
Okay, so let's take another short break, and when we come back, we'll discuss the way forward in the music industry and also with streaming services.
Anything can happen Friday. The art and cultural side of Southeast Asia.
Hello and welcome back to Durian ASEAN. You're still with Gowri
And Grace.
and of course this is your Anything Can Happen Friday, and today we are talking about Spotify. And with me I have John, G and Danny who are here to share their insights on the matter. So maybe first I wanted to ask John, you mentioned earlier that there are a few things you can think of that Spotify could be doing better. So you want to highlight some of those?
As I mentioned, I think expecting Spotify to pay more to the artist just because, music has a certain intrinsic worth, I think that's being a little bit idealistic and naive. I think it is a business, so the business has to be making money. That doesn't change the fact that, like Danny mentioned very accurately, Spotify is not making money simply because Spotify is pursuing a very aggressive expansion strategy. And that also overlooks the fact that Spotify has funding, so they can afford to pay if they really need to. But having said that, I think all of this is contingent upon Spotify getting as many listeners as possible, which I think they're well on the way towards. But moving forward, one of the things that I can think of is that I think the free tier that they have is what basically the goal is to have limited features so that people sign up for premium. And I think that strategy is failing miserably because people are listening to free forever and ever. So either the ads are not annoying enough or the limited number of features aren't enough. And as a producer, as someone who makes music, I think that should be tweaked a little bit. Maybe give people a free trial for 3 months to 6 months, whatever, and then if you enjoy the service, educate your listeners so that they understand what they're paying for and what the difference is.
I think that's what Apple Music is doing, right?
Correct, yeah.
And I just want to add on that when you said the ads are not annoying enough, I'm actually one of those people who use Spotify for free and I don't mind the ads.
Yeah, they sound pleasant.
And you're not alone. I know a lot of people who feel the same way. And also, I mean, another problem with not having enough money to pay your listener is how much revenue you're making. So, like Danny mentioned, I think it's a very fair point that we're very often making a comparison with the American markets, for example. If we take Spotify Malaysia, that's an independent company for this region. And Spotify Malaysia's ad take-ups are terrible. I feel like I've heard one company's ads, I mean, like when I'm listening over, like you're hearing people's, free Spotify, I remember one particular client who I won't mention, and besides that, all the ads are for Spotify. Like Spotify is saying sign up for Spotify Premium and enjoy blah 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 blah. So that tells me if you're not making much money from ad revenue, obviously you don't have that much money to pay your artists as well. So Danny is right. I mean, it might be naive to just assume because they get more revenue, they're going to pay the artists more. But at the same time, basic business says that a business that's profitable can pay more. So I think that is another thing that they should be looking at least within our market, for example, in Malaysia, going out and getting clients the same way radio has big clients. Because partly my mindset is that I don't think streaming, whether Spotify or any other streaming, is some new segment that's emerging in this market or some new phenomenon. I personally think a lot of the streaming listeners are people crossing over from radio. People who feel I don't like radio anymore. Because maybe the talk sets are moronic, or maybe I don't like pop music that's repeated every hour, or whatever it is. For whatever reason, they want to go online to a platform where I choose my music, or somebody chooses music for me that's more intelligent. And the same way radio has existed for the longest time, purely as an ad revenue-based service, I think streaming can do this as well. And that's another thing that I think Spotify could do better, I think.
And Danny, apart from Spotify, what other platforms that artists can look at if they want to get exposure for their music?
Well, my position is that, yes, Spotify is a business, but just because it's a business doesn't mean that, exploitative or even, unfair or bad policies should be accepted. And I also think that the idea that Spotify once it starts making a profit, will pay better is not a good bet, because it's if history is any indication, that it just never works out that way. So my position is that, look, Spotify has two customers. They need listeners, and they need people to put their music on it. Okay, and at the moment, I'll be very honest with you, they don't need us, because they've worked out their agreement with the huge labels, and that's really who they care about. Those are the people that they're giving the bulk of the money to, and we're pretty much to sweeten the deal, so that they can put up in their press statements and stuff like, we've got all these catalogs and all these indie artists discover new music. So it is a scam.
I agree with you. I think the indie stuff is basically just PR.
Yeah, it is. If you're an indie artist, it's a scam. So I would say exercise your right to choose the best platform for yourself, the best return, as an entrepreneur, as a musician, as an artist, whichever way you want to look at it, and pick the ones that give you the best return now, or even a tangible return that you can see in the future, rather than betting on them making more money later and maybe changing their policy. So
Good point.
Along those lines, for me, I think, was it G who mentioned earlier that the best option is printed CDs, whether you're doing an LP or a CD or a whatever, right?
Yeah, I said that that's the best profit.
Yeah, I actually think the best profit is selling online,
Right.
because
Less
you take out
cost.
printing. Yeah, you take out printing costs.
Yeah.
Good.
So even if you're selling it for the same amount, you're not taking out printing costs, so your profit is actually bigger.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I put my work on Bandcamp, simply because it provides me all the tools I need to sell to my, and this is a free account. Yeah, I didn't pay for their extra stuff. Because I feel like maybe down the road, if I want better statistical analysis of where my listens are coming from and all that, then it's fine. But right now, even their free platform that I paid nothing for is already a great advantage for me. Yeah. So I would say, it doesn't have to be Bandcamp. It can be, you can do your research and figure out if another streaming service offers you better rates for your work. You can go for that. If you feel that it's a platform like Bandcamp or what, that's fine as well. But pick the option that works best for you and is the fairest to you, because you have the right and the power to exercise that option. So to me, I've tried a couple of other sort of artist or band platforms, and I settled on Bandcamp because I felt that was really the one that offered the best
Deal.
Not just in terms of monetary return, but just UI and ease of use, and then being very transparent about how they pay and how they take their cuts. So far, I've not felt any reason to distrust this platform, which is much more than I can say for a lot of other platforms out there.
Sure.
Makes sense.
Right?
All right.
And I think a lot of artists have this feeling that, we just have to go with what we're given, unfortunately, because we're artists and, nobody buys our stuff. But I think that is a self-defeating path to take. Really, what I would say is you may not get the optimal thing right now, but in searching for it, in finding those platforms, you will actually be able to progress step by step.
Right. Thank you very much, Danny, for that insight. I think we're already at the end of our discussion, so I want to thank all of you for being here today and sharing your insights. This was a very fruitful discussion.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.